Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Silvavine podcast with your host, Michelle De Silva, a podcast that focuses on creating healing and awareness. In today's episode, Michelle is joined by Janelle Hunt. Janelle is a transformative coach, author, and speaker. She shares her journey of finding serenity and reclaiming her life after domestic violence. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Silvavine podcast with me as your host, Michelle De Silva. I am honored to be joined today by Janelle Hunt, who is a domestic abuse survivor. Janelle Hunt is not only a transformative coach and speaker, but she is also the author of the book Made on What I Know, forgive me, Janelle, which is a book about how to find serenity, reclaim your life, and pursue your goals after domestic violence. Janelle helps women overcome the lingering effects of domestic violence. So welcome, Janelle, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me so much.
There are so many people who are affected by domestic abuse. So it is encouraging to be able for you to come on today, Janelle, to share what you have gone through and perhaps help others who are going through something similar. So, Janelle, how does someone find themselves in a domestic abusive relationship?
Well, it doesn't start off abusive. In the beginning of my relationship, it started off as, young sweetheart, high school sweethearts, innocent love. It didn't get violent until towards the last 7 years of the relationship. I was with him for 13 years. So the last 7 years. But I think what turned and happened, the early signs of, him cheating, the early signs of him when I started to lose weight, the aggressiveness of wanting control of what I wore, who I spoke to. If it was other young men that I spoke to, he didn't like that. So my weight loss was bringing out his insecurities.
So it's quite interesting that you have said, it doesn't always start in that way. It does start off in a way where you do fall in love and you share special moments with that person. So it's really important to emphasize that nobody chooses and wakes up and goes, I enter an abusive relationship, that it does start off with something sweet and loving and caring. You mentioned that there were changes within yourself that obviously got to the point where he started acting out of his insecurities. At what point did you look at his behavior and think, oh, this is not right? Or did it take a while for you to get to that point?
It took a while for me to get to that point because I didn't know the early signs of domestic violence. I thought it was cute. I thought that he just loved me. He was being protective. He didn't want anybody else to, come close or something. I didn't think of it as a threat until it started making me feel some type of way as far as not feeling good about myself, not having self-worth, feeling insecure, having low self-esteem, which I had already struggled with as a child because I was always overweight. So, they're when it started to make me feel uncomfortable on the inside, that's when I knew it was something not right.
So were you comfortable up until that point, Janelle?
I wouldn't say I was comfortable in the beginning, in high school, I guess because, everybody else is, having relationships. I wanted a relationship as well. But I didn't get the attention that other little girls got because, I was always overweight. So once he gave me the attention, I just fell right in. Instead of, having that awareness of self-worth. And my family always made me feel beautiful, but it was outside people who didn't make me feel beautiful. or, looked at me like, oh my God, she's overweight. She's not beautiful because of her weight. So, with struggling with all of that coming up as a young little girl, once he showed me the attention, I just fell right into it. I started feeling uncomfortable when he started cheating, and I wasn't sexually active at that time. So that's when I knew, in the way, in certain things that he would make me feel like not feel good about myself. That's when I knew something wasn't right.
And then from that point, when it's interesting that you said that at first you thought it was cute, the first initial signs that could lead to domestic abuse is that as a society, or women or men, because men also go through this, is that we ordinarily don't look at the warning signs and the early signs as something to look out for. And I suppose this is why a lot of people find themselves in a relationship that lasts for so long. And a lot of people ordinarily start judging or start thinking, and not judging, maybe just not understanding that, and ask the questions, well, why did you stay in it for so long? And it's
Yes.
interesting that you say it's because there is probably a part that is quite acceptable. The early signs is quite acceptable and cute, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Because if you're not having these discussions with your daughters or your sons, you cannot identify the signs of it. And we didn't have those discussions in my family because, in those days, sometimes it was, if something happened to you or if you're going through something, don't speak about it. Keep it within your family and that's it. But that's the problem, is those stories stopped with our parents, and we wasn't educated on the things that we needed to learn, like domestic violence, because I wasn't able to identify it. But it's so easily, if you're not aware of somebody being aggressive or somebody being controlling, you'll think it's cute, but it's really not. It's really showing their insecurities. And then another thing is, I wasn't healed from as a child. I was molested as a child. So I was used to the type of abuse, as far as they use you when they need you, and then, they don't need you anymore. So that's another reason why I believe I wasn't healed from my past trauma. So when the abuse started happening, it was just like a cycle that I couldn't come out of, because I was just used to that abuse of being used or being abused when they wanted to be in my presence. And then afterwards, they didn't need me anymore. So I was used to that type of behavior. And I didn't even know that it was tied to my, me being molested, those same type of behaviors that I wasn't healed from as a child.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that too,
Thank
Janelle.
you.
But it's interesting what you said, that you didn't even recognize, because it was something that you were used to and you didn't know any different. So perhaps as people who go through this because of earlier traumatic experiences, you don't know any different. So this would be quite acceptable. And I suppose anybody who goes through this goes through then on a journey to get to the point to reach where you reach and go, actually, maybe this is not acceptable.
Yes,
Now,
absolutely.
at what point was that for you, Janelle?
What the point was for me is, I kept telling my abuser, like, if you cheat on me again, I am done. And he didn't believe me. And I had started building my relationship with God, and I started praying because I wanted to share things with God that I couldn't share with nobody else, because I was ashamed of it. I didn't want to tell anybody about the abuse. I didn't want to tell anybody about the disrespect, how he made me feel, why I'm going through this, because I didn't grow up in a household, that dealt with domestic violence. So I was ashamed. I didn't want to share certain things. I may have hinted to some things, but I didn't go into deep detail because I was embarrassed. And sometimes I know, like, I didn't want to bring the shame to my mother and for her to be like, you know better, this is not acceptable. I didn't bring you up that way. So it's a lot that I was dealing with and carrying at that time. So I shared everything that I was feeling, everything that I was going through with God. And when I told God, I asked him, I said, if you take the pain away from my heart, I would never put another person or thing in front of you ever again. And I remember the last time my abuser, he used, sometimes he would stay out and wouldn't come home because we lived together. And the one Pacific day, he was getting his bag together to stay out. And he said, I will not be home tonight. And usually I would cry, I would call, I would cuss him out. And I didn't do that. I literally said, I do not care. It does not affect me anymore. And I knew that God was changing my heart at that moment. That's how I know, like, I was getting ready to transition out of that relationship because I started changing. My heart started changing towards him.
And would you say also in that moment, with your heart changing, did you feel that there is almost like a sense of, pulling back to start rebuilding your own worth again and your own self-esteem again?
Absolutely. It was me pulling back from him as far as the relationship, not being so concerned with everything that he was doing. I started focusing on my education, why I was there, because I was always in college, but I could never focus on my studies because I was so worried about him and wrapped up into what he thinks is best and his happiness. And I wasn't, fulfilling my own goals that I had for my life. So I just started focusing on myself a little bit more. And the way that the feeling on the inside, I didn't have that same feeling that I used to have for him. And I had already told him, if you cheat again, that would be it. And when he cheated for the last time, I walked away and that was it. And I'm not saying after I walked away, like, thank God I had my parents, I was able to come back home, but a lot of women don't. But even in those days that you first walk away, it's still hard. You still want to be with this person. You still want to lay next to this person. You're actually grieving because what you thought would work out, it didn't work out. So, those days after the relationship was not, it was dark. It was a lot of going to sleep crying, waking up crying. My mom would always tell me, like, this too shall pass, but I never believed it because I was like, when is the pain going to go away? And what was the turning point for me was when I started accepting what had happened to me, as far as he is not a good person. The relationship is over. Let's focus on what I have left, which is my family that loves me, which is I can finally focus on my studies and rebuild my life. I can finish my bachelor's degree. I can do the things that I want to do. I can travel, because at that time when I was in a relationship, I wouldn't travel because of his insecurities. But he would travel, but I would hold myself back from traveling with my friends. So everything started to blossom once I started to realize I've accepted. This is not going to happen. I'm not turning back. Let's focus on the positive things and the people who love you in your life.
That is, yeah, I fully get what you're saying there. And it's interesting because you said that, even that it was still hard, even though you had made the decision, it was still hard because you were almost in an element of grieving.
Yes.
And my thoughts around this is, it's not, as somebody who, when you're going through a hurtful experience, and somebody who complement your needs or give you what you want, the grieving process is almost like, it's not so much about the person, because the person is not good for you. The behaviors and everything he's doing or she's doing towards you, it is not right. However, it's almost like it's the expectation around it, because you saw like a future with the person, you saw things that you could be doing together, you saw,
Yes.
everybody's dream to kind of, have somebody that you can settle with who's going to love you and always be there for you.
Yes.
So for me, my understanding with this is almost around the grieving around the
Mhm.
expectation of your wants.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
and you mentioned the acceptance part. So when you actually accept that he or she is not right for me, and you accept that what you are wanting out of life is still available to you,
Mhm.
and it's not from this person, then it's through that process, then you're able to actually put the pieces together and kind of build a new expectation, a new want, a new dream into what's best for you.
Absolutely. And during that transition, it was accepting that this is not the man that you will marry. This is not the person who you would have children with, who you had conversations that you would get married and have a family. This is not the person who you will build with. So you're correct. It's the expectations and the dreams and the hopes that you built upon with this person for
Mm.
so many years that you thought was going to happen. And that's part of the acceptance, as it's not going to be this man that I marry. Like, God has someone else for me. It's the things that, okay, he's not in my life, but I have my family. I have my nieces that love me, my nephew that loves me and adores me. And okay, I used to focus on me and him hanging out and having a good time once in a blue moon. I can focus on myself. I can focus on my weight loss. I can focus on my education. I can focus on building my career and walking in my purpose. So you're right. It's finding hope in those dark moments, that you're replacing the things that you lost with the things that are ahead of you and the opportunities that you have. So you're correct about, it's the expectations that you had that you're grieving. Um, and that's exactly what the process was. And it was at those first few weeks and months was dark, because I didn't have I had a family that loved me and who spoke life into me and encouraged me, but I had to accept it and, replace those dark moments with positive things, things that I can focus on myself and become a better woman, and become this person who God wants me to become, So that's what I had to focus on during those dark days.
Mm. But also earlier you mentioned, Janelle, where because ordinarily I would imagine when you're going through an experience like this, you have feelings of shame and guilt, and it's often people who go through such experiences look upon the shame that they bring in, and when in
Mm-hmm.
fact it's not any shame or guilt that is for them to take on, yet somebody who's going through this ordinarily takes on those feelings. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are around this for other people who are going through these feelings of feeling shame, feeling guilt. This is my fault. I can't speak out to anybody. What would you say to somebody that's going through that process to help them?
I would tell them it's not your fault, because my shame and guilt that I carried was much heavier, I would say, because I was carrying the shame and guilt of me being molested, and also carrying the shame and guilt of my abuser, and the things that I experienced with him. So the shame and guilt of not speaking out about your truth, not, being able to share my stories to others. But the one thing I can say, I always tell women in my 8-week coaching program that you can reclaim your voice by identifying the people and the incident that happened in your life that you're carrying the shame and guilt around. Once you identify it, you need to forgive it. And I know that's not easy to do, but I'm telling you, it will release so much shame and guilt and the heaviness of the things that you are carrying in order for you to become the person who God created you to be. Because in those years that I was recovering, I didn't know forgiveness was a big thing for me to not be bitter, because I became very bitter and territorial. And I tell women in my coaching program, you do not want to live your life or be somebody who you're not, who God didn't create you to be, because we are bitter, we're angry because we're holding on to our past. So I tell the women in my coaching program and anyone that I speak to who's going through domestic violence, do not carry the shame and guilt. You need to forgive the trauma from your past. You need to forgive your abuser so that you can release the shame and guilt and you don't become that. Because shame and guilt that you hold on to, that you don't forgive, you become bitter. You become territorial. You don't trust people. And that is one of the main reasons I tell women, forgive. You may not understand why you're doing it. It may not feel good, but the forgiveness is truly for you. It's not for your abuser, so that you can
And that,
be able to step into your light.
and that's really important, to do that process, because a lot of the time when we're going through those emotions, we almost feel like it's counterproductive doing that.
Yes.
But actually doing that is more beneficial to us. But in our minds, we automatically think that we're allowing somebody to get the better of us if we
Yes.
don't do that. But what's interesting with what you said about like forgiving ourselves, which is also really, really important, because you probably would have thoughts of, why am I so stupid? How could I allow myself to do this? This is not you, like, ordinarily, because I'm sure you would have people who do have strong personalities, who are
Yes.
quite confident and find themselves in situations like this. And then it's
Yes.
almost like you say, the shame and the embarrassment later on that people would say, like, and you to yourself, like, how could I allow myself, to be in this situation? So I would see that there is very much an element of making peace with yourself also, which is probably really, really important.
Yes, absolutely. Because I was becoming someone that I wasn't created to be. I was very mean to people. I didn't, anybody new that came around, my friends would bring people around, my family would bring people around, and I would automatically think they was a threat. I didn't socialize with people. Even at work, I stayed to myself. I didn't really, have only the people in my core team that I work with. I was very isolated into myself, because I didn't trust other people. And, my closest friends would even tell me, Janelle, you are mean. You cannot be mean like this. I want you to be around my other friends too. And I'm like, I don't care. You know, I was like, as long as I have you in my group, I'm okay. I don't want to meet any new people. But that is not how God created me to be. And I was allowing my past trauma events to allow me to be somebody that I'm not. So like if me being on a podcast, I would never, because I didn't trust any people in that state of mind. And God reminded me of an apple. It was like, your core is bitterness if you're not addressing your past trauma, if you're not forgiving your abuser, because you're hard on the inside, but you're dressing it up, as every morning you get up, but you really are not addressing the root of your issue. So that is something that I tell everybody, please, please, please forgive so that you can step into your new chapter in life, so you won't hold on to that. And a lot of women don't know that if you don't forgive it, you're still living in it. And that's why a lot of women can't accept, can't trust, and can't get out of that cycle of, what else is there? I'm still thinking about my abuser. I can't move on. I want it out of my mind. But you've got to forgive in order to get past that stage.
And also, and you could, what do you think about this? Like, would you say that your experience was a blessing in disguise?
I would. Yeah. I would say it's a blessing because this is how my book was birthed. my book Made on What I Know. This is how my coaching program was birthed. This is how I'm able to get on with you sharing your platform. It gave me my voice back. It gave me my confidence back. It gave me my self-worth back. It just, in career rise, like I would never think that I would, God will open the door to move me in an area where IT is a big booming thing. But I'm very passionate about speaking about domestic violence to help other women, because so many women don't want to tell their stories. So many women carry the shame and guilt. So my journey was a blessing in disguise, and I thank God that He chose me to go through that journey, because I'm able to help other women who are in it. You know, sometimes when you're going through hard times, sometimes the walk is not even the walk for you. It's the walk for the people you're assigned to help, to be a blessing to give them hope in their darkest days. So I think it was a blessing, because I would never imagine me speaking out about molestation, speaking out about domestic violence, speaking out about giving awareness to young women about domestic violence, how to identify the signs, just talking about things that a lot of people won't talk about. Even young girls, when they're in relationships and their young boyfriend is cheating with other women and it's STDs, what are we teaching them as far as, why do you feel like you are acceptable to go back into that relationship? And I know that because I walked through it. So I thank God, because He gave me the voice to talk about the things that other people won't speak about. And if we're not speaking about it, we can't help them.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, I totally agree with that, and of course, what some people have to endure, um, it's not fair. They shouldn't have had to. Um, some of the things are terrible.
Yeah,
However, I do believe that in every dark situation, there is goodness in it too. I
yeah,
definitely believe that 100%.
yeah,
And like you've just said, when you have these dark moments, or when these things are happening, there is light in that moment to be able to help others. And
yeah,
so others who we can share signs before these things happen, or we're there that could share with others that before people decide to behave in that way, to think about if they are going to conduct themselves in a certain way, or they can, we can start acting together as a society to change all our behavioral traits, to work together, to come closer as human beings, to move away from these things that we are ordinarily doing, and to be better people. So I do believe there is an element of lightness in every dark situation. And once you're able to view it in the way like you described, as in, you know this is a blessing, because by going through this relationship, I was able to connect the dots and say, okay, because of my abuse as a young child, this is still how I'm behaving. And I need this relationship to break away from my cycle, to be
yeah,
able to move in a better way. So I do believe that there is light and processes that we go to. And if we're just able to hold on to understand when we don't understand what we're yet to go
yeah.
through, if we can still hold on and keep on going, then
Yes.
everything will become clear later on.
Yes, absolutely. Um, I just always thought, everybody always, going through life, and it's not a good time in certain seasons in your life, and you don't want to go through it. But I always encourage everybody. It's a reason why God has you going through what you're going through at that moment. You don't know what He's trying to birth in you. So I just always tell women to just, I know with the seasons that you're going through, you may not understand it, but you never know what God is trying to birth. That God is trying to help you give the woman back her voice, to talk about your stories. And it's nothing more amazing than walking in your truth and not holding any shame or guilt that you've been through, for me to speak about everything that I've experiencing openly. because I know that my story is going to help other young women to prevent them from going through domestic violence. And if you are in it, I can help you overcome it as far as when you walk away from it. Because so many women just need a helping hand when they're in that situation. And that's what I think about. I think about the light. I think about the women who I'm assigned to help, to show them I'm an example that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You may be going through the tunnel right now. It may be dark right now. It may be sad. It may be lonely, but there is a future full of lightness for you. You just have to walk through that season and you're going to see it at the end.
Yeah, definitely. So tell me about this lovely book that you've written then. Where did the thought come in? When did you start writing it?
So I started writing this about maybe like 5 or 7 years ago. So what happened was God started waking me up with dreams. I had dreams about me being in my relationship with my abuser. And I had been gone from the relationship probably like maybe 5 years or 7 years. I had already relocated into a new area, Washington, D.C. I was in Alexandria, Virginia. I was working in D.C. And he started waking me up as far as me having dreams. So I had my dreams, and then I would wake up and I was angry because I was like, why do I keep having these dreams about this, about my abuser? This is behind me. I don't want to think about it. So I started journaling in a dream journal. I called it a dream journal. It was just a notebook, and I would just make notes. And then sometimes when I didn't have time to write down the notes on my way to work on the bus, I would write it out in my memos on my phone. And I just, every time he sent me a dream, and I mean it was every single day, and I just started writing down. I started writing it down, and then he started waking me up at 3:30. God started waking me up at 3:30 every morning till 5:30 to write. I was just writing in my notebook, just constantly writing, and then I would just fall back to sleep. And this happened for about 2 weeks nonstop. And I was at work, and this my coworker said, "Have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I said, "No, I never thought about writing a book." She said, "You may consider writing a book because, God might be wanting you to write a book to help women who are still in that situation or who knows, that need help to overcome the lingering effects." And I was just like, I don't know. And I prayed on it and I prayed on it and I asked God for a book title. And he gave me my book title, and it was Made on What I Know. Clear as day in a dream. And I was like, God wants me to write a book. So from journaling, I had already had my book written. I just didn't know how to structure it together. So that's how my book was birthed. And if it was up to me, it wouldn't have been something that I would have shared, but God wanted me to share it. So that's why it got birthed, and that's why my 8-week coaching program that got birthed. So yeah, it's just that's how it all came to life.
So, Janelle, if there were ladies out there who wanted to work with you and do the program, where do they find you and how do they contact you?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, the Janelle Hunt, and you can find me on Facebook. It's just Janelle Hunt. And I have a page on Facebook also. It's Made on What I Know. You can find me there, and you can find my book on madeonwhatiknow.com. And you can send me a DM. My email address is madeonwhatiknow@gmail.com. And I will, take my time out, speak to you. Even if you need a word of encouragement, just reach out. I'm an open book, so you can reach me there.
Thank you, Janelle. I just
You're
think,
welcome.
really important is that we do feel alone when we are going through these experiences. And it's important to know that we're not alone. Even though we might feel like we want to shut the door and not let anyone in. But we don't have to do this by ourselves. There are people like you who's gone through something similar, who's come out on the other side, who's able to understand. and would possibly just be there and listen if that's all what you needed at the time. So
Yeah.
it's really, really important, if others are out there who are going through that, that, you know, you don't have to go through it by yourself. It's
Yeah.
not you to blame. And the
Yeah.
experience is the experience, and it's just something that you find yourself in. And it's the same way that you can find yourself out of the experience too.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100% because, you may feel like you're in a dark moment and you may feel like nobody else wants you or you don't feel like there's no hope. I want to tell you, there is a life after domestic violence. You just have to believe it. You, even in those darkest moments, know that there is light at the end of that tunnel. So that's what I always encourage every woman. It may not feel good right now, but just give yourself some time. Don't give up on yourself, and your future is going to be bright. I promise you, because I'm a living witness to it.
Thank you so much, Janelle, for coming
You're
in
welcome.
and sharing your story with me. I really
Thank you.
appreciate your time
Thank you
today.
so much. Yes, thank you for sharing your platform with me. Thank you for helping me continuously reclaim my voice and reclaim my self-worth. And I just thank you. You're such a blessing.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.